For a long time, the story of history, well, it was kind of a monologue, spoken by the victors, the powerful. But what happens when we find a way to listen to the other side of that story?
I mean, that's the big question, right? When the winners write the books, how do you possibly get to the truth of what happened to the people who were conquered or enslaved or had their homes taken away? Well, today, we're going to explore that by looking at three incredible figures who, against all odds, found a way to make their voices heard.
So let's meet our three witnesses. First up, we have Olaudah Equiano, who used pure, undeniable reason in his autobiography. Then there's Bartolomé de las Casas, a Spanish priest who literally wielded his faith as a weapon against his own people. And finally, William Shakespeare, whose art gave us one of the most powerful symbols of the conquered person in all of literature. Three very different people using three very different tools, all to tell a really difficult but necessary truth.
Okay, let's start with the survivor. Olaudah Equiano's story is just so powerful because he wasn't an outsider looking in. He spoke from inside the horrific system he wanted to tear down. He lived it.
I mean, just think about this guy's life for a second. He was born in West Africa, gets kidnapped as a kid, is forced to endure the absolute nightmare of the Middle Passage, and then somehow, through just unbelievable grit, he buys his own freedom. But he didn't stop there. He did something even more amazing. He wrote it all down. He published his story in 1789, the very same year the French Revolution kicked off. The world was changing, and he made sure his voice was part of that change.
And what's so incredible about his writing is how calm and precise his language is, even when describing something this horrifying. He's smart. He knows he doesn't need to yell or be overly dramatic. The facts themselves are so terrible, they do all the work. He basically forces his readers, people who probably never thought twice about it, to stand there with him and witness this scene of horror.
And this is where you see the real brilliance of his strategy. His book isn't just his life story. It's this devastating takedown of slavery. He takes the two biggest ideas of his captor's world, Enlightenment philosophy and Christianity, and just turns them right back on them. He basically says, okay, you believe in natural rights, well, slavery makes absolutely no sense. And then, you believe every person is made in God's image, well, slavery is a complete violation of that. It's an absolutely masterful move.
Now for a totally different kind of perspective. Our second witness, Bartolomé de las Casas, wasn't a survivor of the system he was critiquing. He was an insider. He was a Spanish priest, a guy who took part in the conquest, until one day he just couldn't do it anymore.
So to really get why Las Casas was so fired up, you have to understand this thing called the encomienda system. On paper, it sounded almost reasonable. Spanish colonists would get labor from indigenous people, and in return, they'd offer protection and teach them about Christianity. But the reality, as Las Casas saw with his own two eyes, was that it was just a brutal, horrifying system of forced labor that led to the deaths of millions.
And wow, listen to the way he talks. He does not mince words. His language is designed to shock you, to grab you by the shoulders and make you pay attention. He keeps repeating that he saw all of this firsthand, that he was there. It makes his testimony feel less like an accusation and more like a confession, which gives it this unique and terrible power.
But this brings us to a really tough question. Las Casas took his fight all the way to the King of Spain. He won the debates. The encomienda system was officially outlawed. But the conquest, the violence, it just kept going. It's a sobering reminder that winning the moral argument on paper doesn't always stop the brutality on the ground. Still, changing the official story, creating that record of injustice, is incredibly important for future generations.
And that brings us to our third and final witness. Now, this one's a little different. He wasn't a real person, but a character in a play who has become this powerful, timeless symbol for anyone who's been conquered. Caliban, from Shakespeare's The Tempest. Through him, art gives a voice to the voiceless.
It's so simple, right? But it's everything. It's a clear, direct statement. This is mine and you took it. Caliban isn't trying to debate philosophy here. He's just stating a fact. The sorcerer Prospero showed up at his home and just took it. I mean, that's the fundamental complaint of colonized people throughout all of history, captured perfectly in just 2 lines of poetry.
And this line, wow, this line just lands with such a punch. It raises this incredibly complicated question. What happens when you're forced to use the tools of your oppressor? For Caliban, the only profit he gets from learning Prospero's language is being able to tell him exactly how much he hates him. He takes the gift of language and turns it into a weapon, just like Equiano did. But here, it's just filled with this raw, searing bitterness.
So we've heard from a survivor, an insider, and a poet. What do we do with all that? What do their stories, when you put them all together, really tell us about what it means to speak truth to power?
Well, together they show us that there's not just one way to bear witness. Equiano speaks with the absolute authority that only comes from lived experience. Las Casas speaks from a place of regret, turning his insider knowledge into a tool for condemnation, and Shakespeare? Well, he speaks for the power of art, creating a metaphor that lets us feel injustice across hundreds of years. And in the end, all three of them, from different centuries, different continents, different circumstances, they all force us to wrestle with the same massive question. It's a question that haunted the age of expansion, and let's be honest, it's one that's still incredibly relevant today. What do we owe to the people whose lives we have disrupted with our power?